doing the...
Coming to you today from New York City, we've got a lot of exciting guests today. We have Allison Morrow. She is, well, she's an award-winning journalist who was fired after she refused to censor an interview with our friend Dr Kheriaty. Who would want to censor Aaron, which is bizarre. She is suing, and we're going to speak to her attorney about this case as well. Again, she defied their orders to censor, and it's a clear violation. This is now words of her attorney, I believe, by a government employer of an employee's First Amendment free speech rights. Reclaim the Net reports that with Silent Majority Foundation, Morrow has filed a lawsuit against the Washington State Department of Natural Resource, DNR, and its top officials citing wrongful termination. And then we will be visited by our friend from Fatty 15, which is Stephanie Van Watson. We're going to get into the longevity nutrient. New book, very important information. Great show. Be right back after this.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. Back, hang on a second. My producer to my left is telling me to hold on a second. I'm going to give you the particulars on Allison. She's Allison Morrow, M-O-R-R-O-W, AllisonMorrowMedia.com. She's also on Rumble and YouTube, I Quit TV News, which I love. And on X, it's Allison Morrow, M-O-R-R-O-W, and Allison is with 1 L, Allison Morrow TV, that is on X. We had a little computer issue here, and Caleb, are we able to bring Allison in?
Yeah, she's right there.
There we go. There we are. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. So I love the I Quit TV news. This is fantastic. But tell us the whole story so everyone gets exactly what happened to you.
Well, can I tell you a quick story about those dolphins that are in your commercial, the Navy dolphins? Yes. Okay. Well, when I was an environmental reporter, that was a top secret program. Like, it's very difficult to get any info on them. But my husband was a Navy instructor. He was a special operations reconnaissance Navy trainer. And so one time he was out with these Navy SEALs, they're doing their training, and they have the dolphins. And this one dolphin keeps coming up and signaling that there's somebody under there. There's something wrong. And they keep telling her to go back down and do her job. She's supposed to go get this fork. And she keeps coming up saying, there's a problem, there's a problem. Everyone thinks she's nuts because they're in this highly secure part of the base, very close to, the coast of California, Southern California. So finally, she comes up with a man in her mouth that she ripped off who was illegally poaching lobster from the floor of the ocean there, and was like,
That's
shook him like,
hysterical.
yeah, like shook him like, I tried to tell you there was somebody under. So my husband actually had to go to hyperbaric treatment with that guy because she had like ripped him up, 100 feet from the sea floor. Anyway, I just had to tell you that story since you.
Oh, that is fantastic. Well, listen, I'm going to be talking to the veterinarian that took care of all those dolphins for all those years. And she's got some interesting observations as a result for human nutrition and whatnot. But I will share with her that story. I'm sure she will love it. I think she's actually listening right now. So it's definitely get to you. You can tell us about that story. But the idea, let's I want to shine a little bit of a light on it, which is if at the speed at which that fish can make 100 feet, a human will get the bends. I mean, it's not, it's not cool.
Right. Yeah, that's why. So they had to rush him to the hospital very quickly. But I just thought it was hilarious. Like, my husband always says it was the female dolphins that are the hardest to work with because they always had like their personality of their own. The men kind of like, the boys did what you told them to do. But so they just thought she was being obstinate that day. She wasn't paying attention and wasn't following the rules. And then so she just like, see, I told you this guy was under. Tried to give you a warning.
There is so much packed into what you just said. I daren't touch it. I will just leave it right there.
Okay,
both dangerous information for me to touch, and also very important information. But I think people can read into it in their own way. I want to hear your story. Now you're like, what happened?
Yeah, you're like, now I see why she got fired.
No. I've had my own experience with cancellations. I just don't want this one. But so go ahead. What happened?
All right. Well, I was a TV reporter for quite a long time. 12, 13 years. I started my TV career as a producer for Fox and Friends morning show on Fox News Channel. I left and got a Master of Divinity degree specializing in psychology and counseling, and then decided to get back into television as a reporter. I worked in several markets, eventually got to Seattle, Washington. I took over the environmental beat there, covered the environment, wildlife for about 5 years. It was an amazing job. I got to see goats fly through the air, hooked to helicopters, all kinds of crazy things that people do in the Seattle area for wildlife and the environment. But I decided to quit TV. We can talk about that if you'd like. I took a job with the Department of Natural Resources for Washington State as a communications specialist, and I was shooting videos for them about wildfire and forest health. On the side, they knew that I had my independent journalism work on several platforms, and when COVID hit, I started interviewing people who were censored or defamed essentially by my old industry of broadcast news, or just generally the mainstream media, print journalism too. I was fascinated by this trend to look at a doctor who had been in practice for, say, 20 or 30 years, and like overnight, they were just a complete quack. Like, they were leading people to an early grave. They were defying all these scientific and medical norms. Like, they were just totally crazy. And that didn't make rational sense to me, that somebody who had saved many, many lives over decades was a leader in their field. One of them, Dr. David Brownstein, is the guy who founded the Holistic Medicine Center in Detroit, Michigan. He was one of the first doctors I ever interviewed. He was actually told by the FTC when he was putting up early treatments for COVID. This was like at the very beginning when nobody knew what was going on, what was working, what they were doing. He thought it would help, that people would like it if he saved people's lives and he posted how he did it on the internet, on his own website. But no, apparently people didn't want to know. So the FTC came after him, told him that he had to shut it down, and I had him on my show. He was one of many, many doctors like that I was profiling just so that people could get a different perspective on what they were seeing on, say, CNN, any number of these channels. And when my bosses saw that, you mentioned Dr. Kheriaty, he was the one who got flagged because apparently it was controversial to talk about natural immunity at the time. So YouTube took the video down. I went to Twitter and said, hey, I interviewed this doctor, and if you think that there are doctors out there that aren't questioning mandates, that aren't questioning what's going on here, it's because you're not allowed to hear them. My bosses saw that and said, wait a second, you can't talk to people who are questioning mandates. We have a mandate. And I said, well, you're the government. You can't tell me what I can do in my free time and who I can talk to in my free time. I'm allowed to talk to Dr. Kheriaty. What am I not allowed to go get coffee with him on the weekend and take a selfie and put it on my Instagram page? I mean, what are you saying here? And they're like, you can't let these people talk about this stuff. It's undermining our policy. So I told them I was not going to do that. I had a First Amendment right to continue, and they fired me. And so now we're suing.
Wow. I thank you for suing. Thank you for pursuing the truth, God forbid. This is a zone that I have been living in for a couple of years myself. I'm surprised you didn't interview me, because I was daring to sort of go, what's going on here? Why are we making these things up? Like 6 foot distancing and terms like social distance, all these things that didn't exist 5 minutes ago, and why we had thrown away the pandemic preparedness plan, and how you justify mandating a vaccine. I mean, do you have the bioethical standing to do that? And how it could be that somebody like Jay Bhattacharya, that a decorated sort of, I mean, listen, the ultimate poetic justice is that he's now going to be the head of the NIH. I don't know about how you feel about that, but to me, that's the full circle. That's the full circle in this whole catastrophe. The fact that the people that were being crushed by the bureaucratic excess that was really behaving in a dangerous and reckless way, they are now going to take the reins and be literally the bosses of these people. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, it's totally right. Jay Bhattacharya was on my show, actually. And I think one of the reasons that I was doing what I was doing was to just show that there were these very, like, I don't know, the best, it's like a normal person, just normal people. They're not, I didn't find anything like extremist, even though now I kind of like wear that as a badge of honor. He actually said that somebody, who was it? Dr. Collins told him, said he was a fringe epidemiologist or something like that in one of the emails that got released in the Twitter files. And so
they had to do it. They had to create a devastating takedown. A devastated takedown of a fringe epidemiologist. But in a weird way, the fact that they could call somebody like him a fringe player immediately tipped me off that there was a hysteria. There was something really wrong here in terms of people's thinking. And the other thing I saw, and Francis Collins eventually admitted to this, that they weren't doing what doctors are required to do in every decision they make, which is consider risk benefits, risk reward. And they seem to be marching ahead with zero. First of all, they're making things up, but then even with that, zero concern for risk.
Right. And that psychological operation, whatever you want to call it, was so effective with journalists. And they bought into it hook, line, and sinker, and were just believing, like you said, that all these people that were going rogue against the CDC were some kind of fringe weirdos, that just didn't know science, and it just didn't make any
murderers. Murderers. They wanted to kill people. They wanted people to die. I mean, they were cast as murderers.
Yeah, no, truly. And then also, there was also this lie that it was like just the disinformation dozen, just a dozen people, I have chickens, I know what a dozen is, just a dozen, it fits in your little egg carton, and, it's not any more than that, questioning what's going on here. And so a lot of these journalists, I think they didn't do their research, and they're just like, oh, it's just a few people, so let's just like go after them. And that was, again, one of the reasons I decided to start interviewing these people. Personally, I just wanted to know what was really going on. But also, I just wanted to show, like, look, these people are at Stanford. They're at the University of California. They're not that I have anything against an underground bunker. I live in Florida. I would probably have one if it wouldn't flood. But this is not where these people were coming from. And I just would like, oh man, it was just mind blowing to me that you could so easily turn them into complete extremist quacks when it's like these people are just your like run of the mill doctors, they're just people who have been in business and practice for decades, and they're totally normal.
They weren't actually just normal and run of the mill. They were actually at the head of their field. They were actually they were esteemed professionals, right. And that's why they posed a special threat. I saw someone's analysis that those were the ones they really went after. If anybody had a great track record and was questioning the status quo, they were in trouble. But you used a few words here I want you to parse out for me. And it's interesting. I'm sure. Did you interview Matthias Desmet in the course of all this? He has of course, the mass formation theory, right? Yes,
I didn't because I tried. He was very busy at the time, and I have a small.
He's in Belgium.
Yeah, he's in Belgium. So.
He's in Belgium,
No, but I know
sorry.
who he is. Yeah.
Okay, and he keeps pointing out that 20% of people during a hysteria become immediately swept into it and brainwashed. Only about 5 to 10% throw the bullshit flag immediately, and you and I were in that camp. And then the rest of the people are just like, just leave me alone, keeping their head down, trying to just get on with their lives. And I'm wondering, so with that as the frame, why were you able to see through this shit? And why did the rest of journalism, literally the rest of journalism, become swept into his hysterical, delusional thinking?
Yeah.
And let me ask a third component to that. Do they just not do their job anymore? Is there just not a business model where they can actually do their job?
Okay, the first question was why, right? Why did I see it and other people didn't? It's $1 million question why some people saw it and other people didn't. I ask almost every guest that comes on my show, especially like in the COVID era, why? And there's so many different reasons. I'm a Christian. I truly believe that it's a spiritual blindness. I think there's just a lack of self-awareness. I think you have to, we were talking about how I went to graduate school at Boston University School of Theology. And the reason that I was going to go into addiction counseling was because I had a loved one who was basically dying of a heroin addiction. And I told a professor when I was working at this methadone clinic about why I wanted to be a psychotherapist. And he said, all right, give me it. And I have this loved one who I can't save, so I'm going to go save other people. And he looked at me and was like, that is a terrible reason to want to be a psychologist, to project all of your issues onto somebody else. Have you ever thought about going to therapy? And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of offended, but I decided to do it. And that was why I ended up getting back into the news business, because I got it like all out of my system. And I was like, I don't want to work with drug addicts. I'm not good at it. This is not fun. I'm going to go back into reporting. But I think that process set me up to be in a position where I had done a lot of just like facing myself on hard issues. And I learned like where my blind spots are. And instead of like looking at people that kind of irk me and blaming them, I like to turn inward and to look at myself and to see, what it is about me that I have this reaction to them. And then that allows you to kind of be curious about people instead of reactive and defensive. And I think that really carried me through my journalism career, like meeting with people and thinking, okay, if I was born in the same situation they were, I had the same parents, I went to the same school, I had the same childhood and young adulthood, could I possibly think the way they do? Well, yeah, I could. So I have no right to really judge them from a spiritual standpoint. I could have ended up just like them. I didn't choose all these different things. By the grace of God, I am where I am. So it put me in a position to not stand over people and to just be interested and not scared of them. There's no fear when, you approach somebody that way. They can't dirty you. I think there's a lot of journalists nowadays that think that if you talk to somebody that is of one of these, I don't know, danger zones on the internet, that somehow you're going to be tainted, which is a crazy way to look at journalism. Those are exactly the people that we should try to understand. But I think that's the reason, that I was able to kind of be in that position is I really believe it's a spiritual blindness. I have no other way to describe it.
And then are they not doing their job? There's just not a business model where journalists can actually be journalists anymore. They just have to read prompters and that's it?
In a lot of ways, there is an issue with just like the factory farming of information and just the fast paced and deadline driven short stories, 90 seconds or less on television, for instance, and shorter copy in the news business and faster, more. But the people who see that and are kind of over it and realize that there's no way you can cover a complex topic in that world, a lot of those people have left. So I wish that was just the reason that like everybody has good intentions and they would do better if they just had more time. But I don't think that anymore. I left in 2019. I saw the Trump administration, the beginning of that, how that was covered. And there's a lot of groupthink, just like a considerable amount of groupthink. And it got even worse when Trump was elected because there was this whole self-righteousness about it. Like, when we go out and silence people, or we quote fact check, or whatever the words are that they're using, that they have this righteousness to them that in a way didn't exist, or at least not to that level prior to 2016. So then when you kind of pushed into COVID became like the next martyrdom, where we're gonna really have to silence people. We really have to go after misinformation. Like, the public is at risk here. And so, as the danger continues to mount, maybe it's the fear within the newsrooms. I've always had this theory that journalists, if you're seeing something that they want you to be afraid of, it's because they're afraid of it. And if they're not afraid of it, they're just not going to tell you about it because they don't really care. I mean, there's just a lot of like projection, I guess, in that world. So I just think there's so much groupthink now, and like managers don't do a very good job of encouraging people to think differently or to get outside of their safety zone. And a lot of the people that would have done that are gone.
Very sad. That's really very sad, and sort of pathetic that we are there where I guess, they only have themselves to blame. And the way you describe it, I have a sort of a glib, moniker for this, which is Trump derangement syndrome. But it all sounds like it's kind of what I was suspicious of. It started with this Trump derangement and then moved on into COVID. And it just went from one delusional thought process to another. And it's truly hysteria and delusion. Now, you studied psychology. Do you agree with me that, because the delusion basically is a thought that's not real, it's not connected to reality per se, and it can't be assailed with rational discourse. That's a delusion. And that's what we were into for sure. And there's still remnants of it, strangely.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, like I said, I think I tend to look at things from a psycho-spiritual perspective, so I think it's both. But there is no point like going to the mat and arguing with a person that's kind of in that mindset. It's a waste of time. I have people on the show that I disagree with a lot. I mean, quite a bit, and I just like hearing what they have to say.
Exactly.
I mean, what's the big deal? Like, we just walk away and I either disagree or agree with you, but I don't have to get like emotional and fight you about it. But like I said, it switched at some point, and like I pick 2016, but I'm sure it was mounting. It wasn't just like the faucet just turned on then. I'm sure that we were pushing towards something like that before. But it went from like journalism is trying to understand the outlier to journalism is trying to silence the outlier. And that was whoever's in charge of that, like whoever was pulling the strings on that, if there is such a person like that or a group of people like that. I mean, they did it masterfully because a lot of journalists don't know they're participating in something like this. They truly believe they are the righteous martyrs and they're doing something right. And people just don't want to eat their broccoli. I mean, I heard that quite a bit. Like when I would challenge people, you're getting this wrong, you're getting that wrong, or people don't like you. They're very offended when they hear fake news. They say, we're working so hard and nobody likes us anymore, and it's all Trump's fault. And so the way they look at that is like people just have been fed this diet of news candy, and they're trying really hard to get you back to broccoli. And if you don't like it, it's just because you don't like broccoli. They don't see it as like maybe they're doing something wrong.
So let's tiptoe now into we'll get your lawyer in here in a second, the First Amendment issues, because you've used a lot of interesting words. You use the word psyop and you're talking about, well, it was what it was. It's really what it was, whether it was a massive psyop or just a de facto psyop, I don't know. But you talked about misinformation and disinformation and silencing the outlier. And this all immediately starts to tread on First Amendment issues. So I don't know if you want to frame the First Amendment crisis you're facing, or if I should bring the lawyer in at this point, or if you'd like to start the conversation.
You can bring in Pete. Yeah, bring in Pete. We'll see what he has to say. But I mean, all of these words that you just said, those are like new words for me in independent media. When I was in TV news, I never knew what a psyop was. I would have thought you were crazy if you said that to me.
I would have too, but now I'm listening to people that there's so many things I would have just been very dismissive of. Now, as Joe Rogan says, maybe the earth is flat. I don't know. I'm open to everything right now because everything I thought I knew is suddenly upside down. Pete Serrano is Director and General Counsel for Silent Majority Foundation. You can hear more about them at silentmajorityfoundation.org. And Pete, maybe you can start us off by telling us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so Silent Majority Foundation is a nonprofit. I'm fortunate that I'm one of the three founders of the organization. We're just over 3 years old. Mid-COVID, I was watching my kids really struggle through school. I'm sure anyone else that had kids had the same experience where they were in, they were out, they were wearing masks. I've got a kid that's dyslexic. She was in second grade at the time, and she was really, really struggling. I happen to be the mayor of the city of Pasco, where I live, which is about 80,000 people. I was on city council at the time, and I wanted to bring an ordinance that said, hey, we're not going to force our different businesses to shut down, whether it's small or large businesses. We're going to let people stay open and use kind of their will to navigate the pandemic as they see fit. I tried to bring that motion, got to a floor conversation, but didn't even get to a real vote. And I had one of my council members say, you know, Mr. Serrano, you're an attorney. Why don't you do something, but don't drag the city into it? And at first, I kind of took that as a harsh dig. And then I really thought of it as a challenge. And so we started with our two early cases. Were based in Washington State. We're against Governor Jay Inslee. The first was a vaccine mandate for prison guards in a local prison facility here in Eastern Washington. And the second one was the mask mandate for the children. Unfortunately, the prison guard one didn't end out in our favor with the mask mandate. Eventually, we got dragged through litigation for over a year, and the mask mandate ceased. And that was the night before we had our final hearing. And the judge asked me, he said, well, you know, at this point, it seems that this is moot. In other words, the case is done and over with. Mask mandate's gone. I said, well, I want some assurances from the state that if they are to reenact the mandate, that we're going to come right back here. And the state and the judge actually kind of gave us that preference. And so, you know, it was nice to be part of what I believe helped end the children's mask mandate here in Washington State. But, you know, fast forward 3 years, we're about 45 cases in, and Allison's being one of the preeminent ones right now, making sure that, you know, individuals have the right to speak on their own time and on their own dime. You know, as you've laid out, well, Allison, you have a really strong background in journalism, and part of that was why Department of Natural Resources liked her in her role. But on her own time, she was producing videos, and they say, you know, that's a basis for termination. We can't have the government or any employer telling us what we're doing, not only outside of work, but inside when it comes to our speech. So that's why we brought this lawsuit. You know, we're working with some other great clients, both on Second Amendment issues, and folks like Dr. Ryan Cole and Renata Moon are, you know, looking at us for help. So, you know, Allison's just one of our awesome stars, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting that that it's the Dr Kheriaty interview that got dinged. In that, so for people that haven't seen the interviews that Allison and I have done with Aaron, he is one of the lead plaintiffs, I guess they would call it, plaintiffs in the Missouri versus Biden case, it was originally called. And he was a psychiatrist at University of California, Irvine. He was for years the head of their bioethics committee and teaching bioethics to medical students. And when the vaccine mandates in particular came along, he said, you know, I'm constantly lecturing this entire institution about how the difficult part about bioethics is when you must walk the walk. It sometimes can be very difficult. And he said, but you do not have, in my opinion, the ethical grounds for a mandate for a new vaccine. It isn't here in the bioethics. Immediately put on leave, and then a year later dismissed. And I don't know, you know, let me ask Pete this. To me, these phenomenon were so astonishing. Like I said, now maybe I believe the earth is flat. I don't know. But the fact that the First Amendment came under attack the way it did, the fact that people are still defending, crushing people's First Amendment privilege under the name of their idea of what good information is. I mean, it's just I keep saying this. I've said it a million times. whose side do you want to be on, the side of Galileo or the Spanish Inquisition? The Spanish Inquisition had very good standing to get that man to shut up. He would have changed everything, and they didn't say he was wrong. They just needed him to shut up. Whose side do you want to be on, guys? But the First Amendment, I thought, was protected, but I guess, Pete, it's not.
Well, it's supposed to be protected, not only from the government, but by the government from other outside actors. And here we have a situation where the government's saying, hey, again, in Allison's case, it's not just you can't speak, but you can't speak when you're not wearing our polo shirt that says DNR, when you're wearing, the Moral Media brand. And I mean, to me, it's just ridiculous. It should be an open and shut case, but obviously as a lawyer, I'm not supposed to say that, because when you look at it, this right is so highly protected and so freely protected. And it is such a foundational principle that we have free discourse, that we have the ability to utilize tools, whether it's a cell phone or whether it's a YouTube page or a Rumble, that we have the ability to communicate with one another. And that's really like the foundation of humanity. But to your point earlier, if you're able to crush the few that speak, you can control the narrative entirely. And that's why Silent Majority Foundations actually sued the state of Washington Department of Health for its COVID misinformation position statement, in addition to the work we're doing with the individual clients. Because if you can't attack, and I think this is part of what you were discussing earlier, when it's the government playing whack-a-mole with 5 or 6 or 10 or a couple dozen doctors, it's easy to shut the science. There's no discourse. Mm-hmm. It's 1 or 2 people who are the Allisons, the Aarons of the world, who are in the U's of the world, who have a platform and the ability to speak, but it's easy to crush that. Had we all said, hey, pause a minute, let's give deference to human thought and collectivism, that might have been a little different than all of a sudden we'll just, listen to what the government says and do what we have to.
It's just so astonishing to me that we did this, and that the government felt they should or could do this, and that people went along with it. Allison, what's the plan going forward? Is your show continuing to focus on people that were canceled, and how do you imagine addressing this going forward? Because as someone who now, Allison, you were trained as a psychologist, you understand the science requires discourse to ascend to something that approximates the truth. What's next for you? What's the direction you're taking things?
I've kind of opened it up to civil liberties, generally speaking. So I have farmers who have the government, like the USDA or the local State Department of Agriculture, come in and dump their raw milk, or all kinds of people who are in an area of civil liberties that maybe people haven't thought about. A guy in New York who was making guns at home, and now he's in prison. So people like that, and I interview them. I like to go direct to the person that's in the news story I might see trending, or maybe they haven't gotten into a news story, but I'm really interested. Like, I still am doing the kind of the thing I was doing before with the doctors. I read CNN, I see this person ripped apart by CNN. I send them a message on Twitter, can you come on my show and explain like what's going on? I just had a constitutional sheriff, Richard Mack, was just on my show, and he's, oh my gosh, I mean, the terrible things that the media says about him, just like, let's give him a chance to explain himself. A lot of journalists will not do that anymore because they call it platforming. Like we talked about earlier, you can't even just listen to someone and say, yeah, okay, you know what? Maybe this person is an a-hole. I don't want to talk to him, but like, at least hear him out, for yourself and see and that's the whole point of what I try to do is like, I take questions from my audience. I let them go direct with these folks and let them decide. Even when I was interviewing the doctors and scientists during COVID, my purpose was not to push their agenda if they had one, or to like say these people are right and the CDC is wrong. It was just to say, here's another side that you're not hearing. And if you want to make an informed decision about your job or your health with all these choices that we are going to have to make in the next months to years with the pressure on mandates and whatnot, then at least make a decision with more information. And so that's just what I'm still trying to do, is just showcase people to let folks know that what you're seeing in mainstream news is not the end of the story. And that interview with Dr. Kheriaty that I did that started this whole thing, that is part of the Missouri v. Biden case. That's in that case. I never thought in a million years when I was interviewing him that day that this is where I would be, on the Dr. Drew show, like several years later.
Yeah. And in the middle of a big federal case. But Pete, Allison used another word that, again, she used words that make the hair stand up in the back of my neck. And the word platforming is a word that drives me insane. Is there a way that we can craft a legal response to people accused of platforming people as just to me, the accusation that you platform somebody is infringing, or at least suggest an intent to infringe on a First Amendment privilege. The same thing with disinformation and misinformation, but platforming in particular is a word that I find most egregious because it is invented out of whole cloth. It came into being 3 years ago. It did not exist before that, and it clearly was used as a cudgel to get people's First Amendment rights dragged away from them. Can we go at that term and really, when people use it, use it the way we think of, libel and other sorts of attacks? That word is an attack.
Yeah, I do think there are appropriate opportunities to bring it in. I mean, there are certain, again, whether it's Allison's case or whether it's one of the doctors that either Silent Majority Foundation or other organizations are representing, I do think there's an opportunity to bring it in, which is why we fought so vehemently against the notion that misinformation or disinformation exists. I mean, it's all information. It just depends on which one's branded by the U.S. government and which one's not. And obviously, the part that's not is, quote, disinformation. And that's for us. That's why these fights are so important. Because if we want to just live in a 1984-esque world where the government controls the narrative, we accept it, and we slowly rot, into that lusterless, quasi.
But it's exactly what the founding fathers set up the system to prevent. I mean, it's precisely what they were thinking about. Amazingly, that they were able to project this far into the future. But Pete, I want to finish up with Allison, but I'll give you last thoughts right here and tell us, if you want to direct people to the Silent Majority Foundation, let us know here.
Yeah, anyone that would like to support, like I said, we're a nonprofit, a 501c3. And so everything that we do is on the back of our donors with their support. It's silentmajorityfoundation.org. And we're here to protect these rights, whether it's the First Amendment, whether it's the free speech element, religious freedom, whether it's firearms, people who are terminated for refusing a vaccine that wasn't a vaccine. We're still working on these cases, and the only way to hold government accountable is to actually do something about it. I'm very grateful for the time that you've shared with us, Dr. Drew. I really appreciate that.
Well, Pete, we appreciate you doing the work, and please keep us posted and we'll bring you back as things progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pete.
And then, Allison, you're not leaving yet. So, first of all, I've never seen so many liquid vessels go across my screen. Different kinds of vessels, from mason jars to coffee cups to I don't know quite what you're doing. And the mason jar. Any of you?
This is for my sponsor.
Right. Any of you that are Loveline fans know that the mason jar has a very special history in that radio show. It just happens to be the case. But I've noticed many vessels crossing the screen. But do you agree with me about the word platforming? Does it not drive you absolutely insane?
Yeah, I remember the first time I came across this idea. A friend of mine sent me an Instagram post of Joe Rogan's. This is like years ago. And she was a fellow journalist. She's like, I don't agree with everything that Rogan says, but this is interesting. And I wrote her back and I was like, why did you have to say, I don't agree with everything Rogan says, but just send me the post. I assume you don't agree with everything that Rogan says. But that was the first time I was like, people have to posture in a specific way so that they're like, put this person, distance from them. Like, okay, look, I'm not in this guy's camp or anything, but like this one thing he said, I guess, is kind of right. And so that was the beginning of when I realized we can't just like share a piece of information. It comes with the identity of this whole weird world of social media where like we're endorsing or we're like on the team of or whatever it is just by sharing an idea. And so, yeah, I mean, that like that was such a brilliant, you were talking about the term psyop, like that is so brilliant. If there was somebody who came up with that, the idea that you can silence people not by force, but by basically brainwashing them to believe that they need to silence themselves. Otherwise, they will be ostracized in any number of ways. And people just can't handle that. They just like, they need to stay in their little groups. They want to make sure whether it's, I totally understand the job thing. Look, I get it. I lost my job, a significant income, but all kinds of other things besides that. You know, I don't want my grandma to hate me, or I you know, people don't even date folks now who vote differently. So yeah, this whole team sport thing on social media where we can't talk to anyone who's different from us, it is sinister but brilliant, however that came to be. And yeah, it drives me totally nuts.
So give me the plan. If I talk to Allison 4 or 5 years from now, what will she have accomplished? What does she want to get done?
Okay, I have a small farm with chickens and goats and cows and a horse, and I would really love for those animals to feed our family. Right now, I'm like a failed farmer, so that would be amazing. And then on top of it, I've started to sell some eggs, so I would love for there to be maybe some farm income. So that's like one of my big goals. I have 2 young children. I love raising them. We're planning to homeschool. One's 4 and one's 2. So that's like the other thing that, you know, the farm works towards is just being able to teach our kids how to raise animals and just learn about like actual skills that can keep you alive. And I'd love to keep the podcast going. I hope, I don't know what's going to happen with the lawsuit. I think my hope is that I come to this in a spirit of love, but truthfulness, not resentment. I think right now where we're failing in like the opposition is that we're all very angry. And I think it like comes out in the way we're talking to people and trying to make progress here. And my parents taught me a long time ago that when you love somebody, love your neighbor as yourself. When you love somebody, you tell them the truth, but you tell them the truth in love, in a spirit of love, not in a spirit of revenge. And so I hope that is the atmosphere of this lawsuit, that it is Allison standing up and saying this was wrong, what you did to me, but to do it in a spirit of love and not revenge. And whatever happens at the end, if that is the journey, then I'll be grateful for that. So we'll see. I don't have any long-term plans other than being a mom and a wife is my number one priority. If the animals can feed my family, that would be great. And if people still want to watch my show, then that would be wonderful too. And I really appreciate your having me on. This is such an honor.
And where do they find it, the show?
I'm all over the place. I'm on YouTube. You can find all the links there if that's the easiest place to go. But I cut my show short there because of censorship. So Rumble, Locals, AllisonMorrow.locals.com, Twitter, Instagram. I'm all over the place. You can't miss me. Whatever your preferred choice is, you just might not get the whole story depending on where you watch.
Wait, I want to get the name of the pod. It's the I Quit TV News, that pod? Is that what we're talking about?
It's just my name, Allison Morrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I hope you'll keep fighting the good fight because we need lots of warriors in there. And it's interesting to me that you came out of addiction sort of world where there's a lot of emphasis put on detaching with love, right? You leave, you do things, you do it with firmness, but you do it out of from not a place of anger and resentment, like you said. And so I think it's an important model for a lot of things. But you still need to, much the way we have to fight addiction in fierce terms, firm, fierce fight, we got to keep this fight going because at the very minimum, we cannot let our First Amendment privileges be trampled on at all, period. That is just a line in the sand.
Right. I agree that when my bosses told me there was not a choice. I mean, I told them I need to think about this for a couple of days because I wanted some time to figure out how I was going to word what I was going to say. But there was no turning back. I knew this was a real crossroads. It was like if I went their direction, that was going to be a totally different Allison, maybe forever. And that if I was going to stand and be the Allison that I am, like this was the moment, this whatever would come. And I had real peace about it. I know people wonder sometimes, like, how do you make these decisions or how do I know? And, sometimes you don't always have that. But in this particular case, I could not choose the other way. I just couldn't. There was like,
yeah.
It was like,
and people will say things like, you're so brave. Like, no, it doesn't feel like bravery. It just like feels like something I have to do or doing the right thing. It's just the right thing. It just, it's not brave or not brave. It just is.
Yeah, it just is.
Well, listen,
it just is.
Keep going. We appreciate it. Allison Morrow TV on X. Follow her there. I will certainly do so. And look forward to speaking at some point in the future as things evolve.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You got it. All right. We are going to switch gears entirely, and we're going to talk about the biology of longevity. We're going to have a little more dolphin talk, a little hot dolphin talk. We'll go back to the story about the dolphin that brought the diver up from 100 feet under the ocean. That's crazy. It is a crazy story. Is your mic on? No. So, okay. Let me give Stephanie's particulars here. You guys know Stephanie Van Watson. You can follow her. Well, she just wants you to go to the Fatty 15 website. And The Longevity Nutrient is the book coming out. We're going to talk about in great detail. I'm looking very forward to this book. There it is. Unexpected Fat That Holds the Key to Healthy Aging. And we're going to talk about, there's a lot of chatter about inflammation and oxidative stress. And I don't think people really understand what that is. And Stephanie's a great communicator, and she is the brains behind bringing us Fatty 15. So she's the real deal in terms of her science background. And we're going to try to explain it to people in a way you can understand it and why things like Fatty 15 are very important nutrients for us all to be on. And we'll be right back after this. Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. I want to teach you about pharmacogenomic testing. This is changing the way we approach healthcare. By analyzing a patient's genetic profile, pharmacogenomics helps physicians personalize drug treatments for more effective results. First, it enhances medication efficacy by predicting how a patient will respond to a specific drug, reducing the trial and error process, especially in mental health care. For example, it can guide the choice of various medications to minimize side effects and improve outcomes. In the long run, pharmacogenomic testing leads to cost savings. It shortens the time to find the right treatment and avoids expensive side effects. It also supports more personalized care, helping physicians make better decisions and ensuring that treatments are tailored to each individual's unique genetic makeup. Test simply requires you to swab your cheek, then you send in the sample to our lab. Discover the power of personalized medicine with pharmacogenomic testing. Tailor your treatments based on your unique genetic makeup. Reduce trial and error, avoid side effects, find the most effective medication for you. Take control of your health today. Go to drdrew.com/checkgenetics. That is drdrew.com/checkgenetics.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
I'm going to be encouraging people to shop Paleo Valley for the holidays. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. The sticks, they make great stocking stuffers for all different tastes, whether chicken or venison or grass-fed finished beef, and they've come different flavors. You will love these. 5 varieties of beef sticks. pasture-raised chicken, pork sticks, low in calories, high in protein, dense in nutrition, carefully sourced. No chemicals, no processed ingredients. They're superior to other jerkies for sure, and they are delicious. I'm interested in conscious eating, that people be aware of what they put in their mouth. One of the ways to do that is get a trusted partner, and Paleo Valley can be that partner for you. Susan can tell you how many times that having had a protein stick handy has saved the day we're on the road. So stock up, share healthy snacking with the people that you care about. Again, it is doctor.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. Great holiday season, great gift. And don't forget the bone broth that we love also, obviously. It's great to have a partner in this, right? It's hard to read every label, but when you have a really trusted source, no, I'm serious about this. That's an important way to do it. She's laughing at the body passing in the night behind me. Speaking of having a trusted source, Stephanie Van Watson, you can see her book. You can order her book. It's on pre-order now. The Longevity Nutrient. Doctor.com/Fatty15, or just go to the Fatty15 website. You can find out more about the Fatty15 story and products. And the fact that pentadecanoic acid is one of the first deficiencies identified in decades, and how Fatty15, we'll talk about this let's bring Stephanie here. She's the brains behind all this. Stephanie, welcome back.
Great, Dr. Drew, wonderful to be here.
So let's tell them. Did you hear the story about the dolphin that dragged the diver up from the lobster poaching?
I did. Allison I couldn't have asked for a better tee-up. I mean, come on. That was great.
I know. Except I fear for that diver's life. I mean, you can imagine how fast a dolphin would bring him up to the surface. I'm surprised he didn't explode, let alone get the bends. So let's talk about what you observed in your dolphin research and how we got to the pentadecanoic acid. Let's sort of sketch that out. And then I think we should jump over to the book then and talk about what's in the book. But talk about the origins first.
Yeah, absolutely. Because how could you not start with the dolphin story, right? So
exactly.
As we've shared, I'm a veterinary epidemiologist and was working for the U.S. Navy, helping to with the care of the aging Navy dolphins. That's why I was brought on, and it was really studying, Dr. Drew, about understanding why some Navy dolphins were aging healthier than others. Surprisingly, as mammals, or maybe not surprisingly, as long-lived large-brain mammals, Navy dolphins age a lot like us. They can develop, as you had shared earlier, Alzheimer's disease, high cholesterol, chronic inflammation. All these things we see with aging in humans, we saw in dolphins, which is really fascinating. And importantly, we were seeing that some of the dolphins at the Navy were aging healthier than others. Specifically, some dolphins were aging slower, at a slower rate than other dolphins. So we were able to use this advanced technology called metabolomics. We looked at hundreds of small molecules to figure out which small molecule predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And long story short, there at the top was C15, a molecule I had never heard of, which ends up being a surprising saturated fat. And we didn't know it at the time. This was back in 2012, 2015. We didn't know it at the time, but the dolphins had just unlocked the secret to longevity.
And let's talk about it. So you then identified a deficiency, and that our modern diet has relatively poor sourcing of this particular molecule. And I'm guessing the book chronicles this progress, right? You go along into, let's talk about the deficiency and then the cellular fragility and what can be learned from the book.
That's right, exactly. So this discovery, as we talked about, just was started by the surprising discovery with dolphins. We very quickly then moved this pure saturated free fatty acid into the lab, and we spent 3 years doing 8 studies to understand, not only is this saturated fat a good fat, but it met these rare criteria, being the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years. So this was an added shocking discovery. And as an essential fatty acid, just like you shared, if something is truly essential, it's a nutrient that our bodies have to have, then we would expect to see a nutritional deficiency. Like, when you think about things like vitamin C deficiency and scurvy and vitamin D deficiency and rickets, this is the first deficiency syndrome found in over 75 years. It's called cellular fragility syndrome, and it's caused by us having too low levels of C15. It was timely that Allison was talking about having goats on her farm. A big reason our C15 levels have declined is our primary source of C15 is from dairy fat, and it is highest in animals that are grass-fed, and fed kind of like on your older school farms.
Yeah, and we have had so much indoctrination about low fat that and all these crazy moves away from butter and tallow that were at best ill-advised, at worst catastrophic. And this is one of the byproducts of all that. I would argue, though, that as you get, let's talk about this. So as you get into the topic of longevity, though, you can't get that much longevity effects from dietary sources, I'm guessing, unless you really supplement this product.
Right. It's a great point. So what we discovered is that we need C15, that nature has used C15 for millions of years, not just for mammals, but even bacteria and other life forms to help extend lifespans. If you take something like Listeria, which is a bacteria, it's one of the few bacteria that survive in the refrigerator in refrigerated temperatures. The way it does that, with the way it survives better than other bacteria, is C15. So life has used C15 across many forms to help basically extend our resilience and our ability to live longer. We know that if we have less of it in our food, that can accelerate our aging. But getting to your point, we then were able to work with the Navy, funded by the Office of Naval Research for 10 years, to then let's take C15, let's optimize it, and let's find a way to use it to actually reverse the aging process. So that's what we did, and the whole journey there is in the book.
Yeah, I've been saying recently that, I spent most of my career trying to intervene on illnesses or conditions that shorten life. But I really feel like for the first time now in the last few years, I'm able to talk about supplements and even, behaviors like, resistance training that lengthen life, that don't just prevent the shortening, but you can actually, wellness and longevity can both be pushed out into the future longer than we ever could before.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in fact, this, for a long time, longevity was seen as this kind of a far off world of kind of science fiction world. Health was something we all strive for. And just like you said, they are inextricably linked. Like you to have longevity, you need to have health. And the earlier and the more targeted we can address it, the longer, healthier we'll be and the longer we'll live. It makes a lot of sense, but it is actually a new thing to actually link health and longevity in this kind of extending ourselves as long as possible.
And in recent years, the word inflammation has been tossed around in a really inaccurate and almost sort of gross. I don't mean gross in the terms of disgusting way, but gross in the sense of too unsophisticated way. It's just sort of tossed around. And when I think about inflammation, it to me means a number of different things. In fact, I think the government's going to start getting involved in preventing people from claiming something's an anti-inflammatory because it's so non-specific. So, it seems to me inflammation probably has a role here, but the big intervention is to reduce oxidative stress, and I'll let you explain what that means, and particularly oxidative stress on cell membranes, which have their own sort of lifespan and sort of longevity to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's kind of an ironic thing, right? So when we talk about oxidative stress, which a lot of people know, they know that it's a bad thing and they want antioxidants. So we think of things like blueberries and things that are antioxidant are good for us. But when we take the word apart and we look at it and we think like oxidative stress is oxygen. So it's kind of ironic that the one thing that we need, like we can't live without for 10 minutes, right? Will kill us if we don't have oxygen, ends up being the same molecule that kills us over decades and decades.
Right. It's this weird polar molecule. We like to get the electrons from it, but when it loses or gains, it becomes more polar, and then it can rip through things, and that's the problem. Or it can attach to things. And I think it's mostly in cell membrane. It's kind of attaching, right? Isn't that how it does its damage? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's this is insidious Jekyll and Hyde, insidious nature of oxygen really happens at the cell membrane level. You know, we're made out of 3 trillion cells, and every one of our cells is surrounded by a membrane and armor, and that armor is made up of fatty acids. And there was this whole theory that came out from A.J. Holbert back in 2005 called the cell membrane aging theory of aging, or cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging. Get that right? And what he showed was that the more fragile the fatty acids in a cell membrane, the more susceptible those cells to being attacked by oxygen, resulting in this thing called lipid peroxidation or oxidative stress. And that then made a cell fragile, fall apart. And that incited inflammation throughout the body and resulted in shorter lifespans. This cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging explains how humans live longer than mice. It's all about how strong versus how fragile our cell membranes are.
And again, these can be, and when they fall apart, to me, that's when the inflammation kicks in, because you have senescence and other inflammatory sort of mediators coming in to clean everything up. But I think about the oxidation part as being the precursor to the inflammation in a weird way, even though I guess it has an inflammatory course to it as the oxygen gets loose. But when it's bound on the cell membrane as lipid peroxidase, it's just weakening the cell membrane. And it doesn't just do that to the exterior of the cell, it also does it to the mitochondrial membranes, right? Maybe even more so.
It does. And so it's just kind of what you're going through here is it's a cycle that feeds on itself. So when we have, oxygen, and we have 2 fragile fatty acids in our cell membrane, and these are fatty acids that have double bonds. That's what the secret of C15 is, that it's a sturdy fat that has no double bonds. So it is completely resistant to this oxidative stress. But if we have cell membranes with too many fragile fatty acids in it, oxygen goes in, attacks it, it makes it weak, the cell falls apart. That happens in, like you said, both the cell membrane, our mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells. That then sets up the cell for getting fragile, hence cellular fragility syndrome. And that incites release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, this inflammatory response, and in fact, a whole new form of cell death called ferroptosis. And it's an entirely new way our cells are dying due to this syndrome of lipid peroxidation, oxidative stress in our cell membranes.
Right, and if you can reduce that, you can push that time frame out into the future. It's interesting. I mean, I believe that mitochondria were bacteria at one time. So isn't it interesting that the cell of this little bacteria that made animal cells possible is sort of dying the way bacteria die? It's shocking. Yeah. That's just the same thing. But I want to give a pitch for the book, because if people want to know the extended story of pentadecanoic acid, obviously it's in the book. What else are people going to get from reading The Longevity Nutrient?
Right. So it goes really into the deep dive of, if you're going to call a book The Longevity Nutrient, which, this was actually Simon & Schuster reached out to me last summer, Dr. Drew, and they've been following the story and the science. There are now over 100 peer-reviewed papers on C15, is this healthy saturated fat. You still ask a lot of people today, and most people have never heard of C15, let alone that not all saturated fats are bad. So Simon & Schuster reached out, and they said, this is a book, like this is a movement, and we really want you to be able to write this book, help support and get it out to the world. Is
it just the science, or is it also the story?
It's the story for sure, and so it's the way they put it is a really engaging way of explaining the science, but all through the story of starting with the dolphins, and then just being able to trace the different investigations that were happening of in Japan and Korea. They were working on how C15 has anti-cancer properties. In Italy, they were working on different components. Like throughout the world, tracking all of these different studies that were happening, all leading to the same conclusion, which is that C15 is the longevity nutrient, outperforming even molecules like rapamycin, that we hear so much about as extending longevity.
Yes.
So the book really walks us through this very compelling story that whether it's large-scale epidemiological studies, receptor-based, what's called mechanisms of action, how it works, how it's helping prevent and slow heart disease, type 2 diabetes, different types of cancer, and all the science behind it. But again, in a very compelling, friendly, reader-friendly way.
And I've noticed the rapamycin sort of crowd has come out. I go, oh no, we're the real longevity product. Is there head to head? It's weird that they just sort of get in these camps. It's almost like what Allison and I were talking about, how people are in these camps and tribes. Just listen to this. Draw your own conclusions, everybody. Listen to the facts. But do you do head to head studies with rapamycin of any type?
We did. And in fact, it was triggered by, this study was inspired by Dr. Nick Shork, who's head of a prestigious longevity consortium. And Nick said, hey, with all of these properties of C15 that you're showing as this essential fatty acid, it's anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, anti-cancer, antioxidant, even antimicrobial. He said, I bet I would be curious to see how it did if you went head to head against rapamycin and metformin, two of the leading longevity molecules. And so we use this really industry standard, robust third-party study panel where it takes 12 different human cell systems mimicking various disease states like heart disease, liver disease, lung disease. And we tested pure C15, fatty 15 against rapamycin and metformin at 4 different doses. And we showed that not only was C15 extraordinarily safe across all of the different systems, but that it had 36 cellular benefits and longevity enhancing cellular benefits, which was even more than rapamycin and twice as much as metformin. So the long story short is, C15 is what our bodies have needed all along to extend longevity and now reverse aging. We didn't have to go all the way to Easter Island for this product coming from bacteria, which was rapamycin.
Right. But as you take longer, like it takes a while to really have full longevity effect. Is that correct?
It takes, so it's usually about 3 to 6 months for it to be able to, because the whole point is it needs to get into your cell membrane, stabilize those cells, and be able to have its effects. One of the most compelling aspects of C15, because a lot of times you hear about longevity drugs, and you think, okay, so now I just need to take it and then hope I live longer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, I get hope and pray and spend a lot of money. But the nice thing about C15 is that, and why it is so meaningful for people like Nick Shork and experts in longevity, is that there are tangible clinical benefits seen within months, which is what you should expect to see. That 2 clinical trials have been completed with C15 supplementation. It lowered LDL cholesterol. It improved liver enzymes in people with fatty liver disease. It improved the gut microbiome. It strengthened red blood cells, all within 12 weeks. So, it's really something that our bodies were meant to have. And now we can leverage it so that we can further strengthen our cell membranes, not just to extend longevity across species, but within individuals ourselves, just stay healthier longer.
Well, I hope you all get why I'm so excited about Fatty 15 and so grateful to have Stephanie in my life. I spotted this early. I knew what this was going to be. I was been an enthusiast about this molecule for quite some time, and the data just pours in and just confirms my hunch about it. And thank you, Stephanie, for developing it, for doing all the hard work, for allowing people like me and my family to benefit from it, and also my listeners. And so I'm just so grateful. And we'll give a little nod to your husband too. He had a little bit to do with it, so I'll give him a little bit, but mostly it's Stephanie. Let's be fair.
I appreciate that. I actually appreciated too, that Allison at the end of hers, she talked about fighting the fight. And, this 10-year journey really has been about, Teddy Roosevelt being in the arena where it's not the people standing by the sideline and criticizing. It's the people who stay in the arena. It's like, goodness gracious, I was a dolphin veterinarian, who was coming out and saying a saturated fat is good for us and now is extending our longevity. And it was really just being able to follow the data and, stick with it and being able to now have the world's leading scientists being able to confirm that and to be able to have this book has been great.
Exactly. And now if you want to hear the story, if you want to learn more, get the book. It's the Longevity Nutrient. Pre-order now. It's coming out in about a month or so?
It's coming out in March. And I've been concurrent with National Dolphin Day, which is super fun.
Oh, how fun. Well, listen, Stephanie, thank you. And again, come back, talk to my group as question, this group as questions. If you sort of notice that people need a primer in certain areas, let's come in and heat them up and tune them up in certain areas. I'm sure the book would, I have this feeling this book could be like a TV series or something. It just has that, it'll be, it'd be dramatized, right? It'd be all kinds of weird, they heat up the actual experience, but it just has all those sort of qualities to it. It's such an interesting story, and that here you are changing people's lives. Humbly, I think that's what's happening. So again, we'll go to Fatty15, Dr.com, Fatty15. Stephanie, you're on Twitter. Let me get that on X rather.
Yeah, Fatty15's is all there, and all the science, if people really want to nerd out, is at discoverc15.com. So you can see all those 100 plus studies. Literally, there's now 1 to 2 papers being published a week on C15 around the world now. So it is building. Dr. Drew, thank you for being part of this movement. You've been
That's amazing. I'm just so privileged. I feel so privileged, and I knew it, and it's so nice to see it bearing fruit, and I hope it helped lots and lots of people. That's the whole goal here. All right, Stephanie, thank you, and we'll talk soon, no doubt.
All right, take care.
Cheers now. Susan, you're walking around in the background. You're running to your station. What's going on?
I just learned there's a National Dolphin Day.
Oh, yeah. Month, right? Dolphin month? Dolphin
Did you say month? I thought you said day.
I've already lost it, but we'll find out. We'll
all right, we got to celebrate that with our Fatty 15. Everybody take your Fatty 15 on National
I heard you guffaw out in the distance.
Because I heard that. I'm a little behind because I was in the bathroom curling my hair.
Ah, well, nice. Thank you for sharing. So let's get the upcoming guests here. We've got a little bit of a choppy week coming up. We're going to, I believe Ed Dow just got confirmed for Wednesday with Kelly Victory. Is that show early by any chance? Or normal time, 3 o'clock Pacific time. Elijah Schaefer, we're going to have a special Friday show with him. He's a very interesting dude. You guys are going to enjoy talking to him.
Boca Raton.
He's got his own show and his own setup there in Boca Raton.
Thursday.
I thought we were going to do it on Friday. Thursday. Oh, I beg your pardon. So we're doing it on Thursday. Really? You have time for that on Thursday? Aren't we running around a bunch?
I believe that's at it says on my calendar. It says that's
Thursday.
at 2 p.m. on Thursday.
It's okay.
2 p.m. on the 5th.
Thursday
is that correct?
And then when we get back to California, Justine Bateman's coming in. That should be very fun. On the 11th, Susan's doing her show, calling out. That is yet to be formatted. Do you know who's going to be in that yet?
Yeah, but it's okay.
Okay, secret sauce to be revealed. And then Jeff Dye, comedian, you've seen him on Gutfeld and the Corolla Show. And then on the 12th, Matthias Desmond and Aaron Kheriaty, both names you heard in the conversation today. That is going to be an extraordinary show. And then Justin Hart coming around and Toby Rogers. So a lot of lineup coming, a lot of interesting guests. We're very privileged and fortunate to have the guests we do. We appreciate you all supporting us and supporting the people that make this all possible. I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm for Ed Dow on the restream. I'm just going to go to the Rumble Rants quicking. Tommy Kaiser Jr. hates us all. I don't know why.
Thank you, Emily Barsh, for your content creations.
Oh, that's all part of a longer complaint he's been saying. I don't think it has to do anything with you. Okay. Yeah, it's referring to someone else.
Okay, nothing to do with us.
Tommy's single, though, by the way, if anybody wants to.
Molten Salt, you're welcome for the show. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just going to quick through. There's a lot of complaints about college professors. I think that's what Caleb was talking about there. All right, try to be kind. I think Allison had a good point. It's come with peace and love. It's more powerful. Otherwise, it's just tit for tat, back and forth. Turn the cheek as best you can, and it's okay to be firm, and it's okay to harbor some anger, but to come at all this with anger is going to, I don't know. Let the anger fuel you, but don't let it break out into the discourse. I think that will adulterate things. All right, we do. Thank you, Willie Lee. We do have great guests, and we will see you with Ed Dowd Wednesday, 3:00. Kelly Victory hosting in my stead. See you on Thursday when we return. Susan, is that at 3:00 Pacific Thursday?
Actually, it's at 2:00 Pacific on Thursday.
2:00 Pacific on Thursday. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.